Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Nigerian police promised to stop using force against protesters who've been taking to the streets in demonstration against the notoriously violent SARS squad. It's to be disbanded, but some fear that the change to the country's policing will not go far enough. Also, Guinea enters the final stretch of campaigning ahead of this weekend's presidential election, in which incumbent Alpha Condé takes on his main rival, once again, Seli Galin Diallo. And people living on Senegal's famous Goree Island, a former slave trading centre, welcome its recent reopening after 7 months without the tourism that sustains their livelihoods. But first, Nigerian police have tried to defuse protests against the notorious Special Anti-Robbery Squad, known as SARS, by promising to release jailed demonstrators and roll back crackdowns on rallies. Marchers have been calling for SARS to be disbanded because of its officers' notoriety for use of extortion and disproportionate violence, and many of whom have been accused of extrajudicial killings. Authorities say SARS is being broken up. On Tuesday, police announced that a new unit would fill the gaps left by SARS, which is actually a worry to some who fear that the unit may disappear in name only. Sam Olukoya joins us now with more. Sam, so tell us more about exactly what police have agreed to change with regard to SARS and the treatment of protesters.
Well, the police have agreed on a number of measures. One of these is that force will no longer be used in terms of stopping protesters. They've also agreed that all those that have been arrested in the course of this protest will be released, and they will investigate cases of human rights violations that have been carried out by SARS in recent years. And then the SARS personnel, they will be evaluated and retrained before they join the police. And then crucially, they said they will increase the salary of the police.
So we're seeing all of these concessions. Do you think that they are enough to bring about the broader changes that protesters have been calling for when it comes to policing in the country?
Well, I think protesters, this will definitely not go far enough for many of the protesters. For them, they feel that you need very serious and structural changes in the police force. You need a degree of accountability where policemen will be accountable for their actions. We've not seen that, as far as the Nigerian police is concerned. So this definitely wouldn't go far enough. Indeed, in the course of this protest, we've seen policemen brutalize Nigerians. It's like a case of they not believing in the protest. So that wouldn't go, definitely the measures taken so far wouldn't go far enough for the protesters.
So why is disbanding SARS not enough to change policing in Nigeria? What needs to happen?
Well, it has to be said that SARS is just an arm of the police. The problem we have is larger than SARS. SARS members are drawn from the police force. They are not employed as SARS people. They are drawn from the police force. So the problem that we've seen in SARS is a reflection of the larger problem that exists in the police. Unfortunately, the emphasis has been so strongly on SARS, and the government sort of tried, and the police authorities sort of try to placate the protesters by saying that they are taking measures against SARS. But even if you take measures against SARS, if you leave the larger police force, then you have quite some problems. The police force has not been very, very professional, and until you have a professional police force, what has happened will continue to happen. So if they bring in some more members from the police to set up a unit to replace SARS, if they are not different from SARS, then they will just come up and behave just as we have SARS behaving.
Thanks very much. Sam Olukoya there for us in Lagos. Now, UN human rights investigators have said that the detention of Cameroonian opposition leader Maurice Kamto is a rights violation. Kamto has been effectively under house arrest for about 3 weeks now. Regina Sondo tells us more.
14 independent human rights experts of the United Nations have called on the Cameroonian government to stop intimidating political activists, to free the main opposition leader of the country, Maurice Kamto, and other persons who were arrested during the peaceful protests in the country. These activists have equally decried the torture of detained journalists and protesters in the country. It's worth mentioning that ever since September 22, rallies have sprung up in different parts of the country following a call by the main opposition party for an end in the conflict in the English-speaking regions of the country, a reform of the electoral code, and for a national dialogue. Now, when these protests were called, about 500 persons were arrested. 200 of them are still in detention. Maurice Kamto, the main opposition leader, is under house arrest with his family. Political activists have said that members of opposition parties have been intimidated following this protest in the country. We tried to reach out to the Cameroonian government for a reaction, but then we didn't get a response.
Regina Sondo there for us. Now, Mali says that a dozen soldiers were killed by suspected Islamist militants in an attack on an army base. The raid reportedly happened at an installation in Soukura near the Burkina-Bay border overnight into Tuesday. The army claims that several of the extremists were killed in the ensuing fight. These attacks are the deadliest in the country since the coup that overthrew former President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta back in August. Candidates in Guinea's upcoming presidential election are in the final stretch of campaigning. There are 12 in the running, including incumbent Alpha Condé and his main rival, Cellou Dalein Diallo. 82-year-old Condé is bidding for re-election after pushing through a constitutional change earlier this year that paved the way for a bid for a controversial third term. Our correspondents tell us more.
There's a festive atmosphere in the streets of Kaloum in downtown Conakry. Supporters of the ruling party are revelling, convinced that Alpha Condé will win once again on October 18th.
L'élection présidentielle qui sera effectuée le 18 octobre, Alpha Condé va remporter avec un coup fatal.
C'est le choix du peuple. C'est le peuple qui a réclamé Alpha Condé, le peuple de Guinée. Il va gagner, Inch'Allah. C'est un coup fatal cette fois-ci. En 2015, c'était un coup KO. En 2020, là, c'est un coup fatal.
Despite losing the last two presidential elections, enthusiasm hasn't waned among the opposition leader, Cellou Dalein Diallo's supporters. For them, he's the right man for Guinea.
On est fatigué, on veut du changement, on veut une réalité directe. Raison pour laquelle nous sommes venus soutenir. Raison pour laquelle nous sommes venus soutenir un monsieur vraiment qui est digne. On sait bien qu'il peut changer la Guinée.
Il est meilleur pour nous. Il a travaillé en Guinée pour être premier. Pour la première fois avec le président Conté. Il était premier ministre, mais ce qu'il avait fait dans le pays, on a vu ça. C'est pour cela qu'on le soutient jusqu'à présent, on est derrière lui.
10 other candidates, including several former ministers under Alpha Condé, are also running. And for the first time, two women are taking part in the race, Makali Traoré and Makali Camara. If Alpha Condé and Cellou Dalein Diallo are the favourites, other candidates hope to disrupt the status quo, like former minister Ousmane Kaba, a former close associate of Alpha Condé.
Nous avons la confiance que c'est l'homme qu'il faut et il pourra les battre dans les urnes. On est sûr de la victoire.
The final say will go to the more than 5 million Guineans expected to vote at the polls this Sunday.
The 2,000 people living on Senegal's famous Goree Island off Dakar have welcomed its recent reopening after 7 months without the tourism that sustains their livelihoods. The notorious former slave trading centre had been shut because of coronavirus. Although that did make it hard for people to earn a living, the island has only seen 3 official cases of COVID-19 during the crisis. Nicolas Chemin tells us more.
Finally, tourists can once again return to the famous island of Goree off Dakar. There are now 8 boats a day compared to 12 before the pandemic. The island was closed to tourists for 7 months, yet most residents depend on them for their livelihoods.
On a beaucoup souffert. Il n'y a pas de travail. Et ici, c'est le lieu touristique pour les gens qui viennent ici. On ne travaille plus. Ma mère, elle est touristique. Elle vend des colliers depuis lors. On a fait de Gorée.
For centuries, many enslaved Africans were brought here before being sent to the American continent.
C'est quand même un peu flippant de venir regarder un endroit après une pandémie pareille. Donc c'est beau quand même. En tout cas, moi quand même j'apprécie, malgré que l'ambiance n'est pas comme je suis venu il y a 9 mois.
These last 7 months, only the island's 2,000 residents could use the boats that bring food and goods to Goree. They welcome the return of the tourists.
Le fait de voir des touristes fait un petit peu revivre l'île. Parce que Goree a toujours reçu beaucoup de monde. C'est un lieu touristique où, bon, quand il n'y a pas de touristes, on est comme un petit village isolé. Donc le fait que les gens reviennent, bon, ça nous réconforte.
Restaurant owners have been particularly hard hit.
Que l'île, dans sa globalité, soit restée 7 mois sans fermer, que moi je reste 7 mois sans travailler, en plus de payer mon personnel pendant 7 mois, vous voyez. Donc c'est une période sombre pour un investisseur.
Some historical sites like the house of the former slaves are still temporarily shut. So far, Goree has only had 3 coronavirus cases, but local authorities say they want to remain cautious.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us, and do so again if you can. Take care.